Hello and welcome back to Wild and Untamed. I am your host, Lara Raybone, and in today's episode, I have the incredible Giulietta Durante, Hormones in Harmony, who is a menstrual cycle nutritionist and period coach who inspires women to step into their healthiest and most vibrant version of themselves. Through hormonal healing, cycle-nourishing nutrition, and coaching, she empowers women to realign with their divine feminine power, to deepen their connection with self and live in harmony with their hormones and bodies for greater well-being. Giulietta compassionately guides women back to the wisdom of the womb, helping them to discover the magic of cycle syncing, honoring the courageous, sexy, enlightened goddesses that they are. She is on a mission to help you fall back in love with your hormones, and she's here to inspire you to live cyclically, to empower you in your hormone health, and to show you that we deserve better when it comes to our hormonal health. In this week's episode, we cover how our bodies as women experience different somatic seasons. We move through an inner winter, an inner autumn, an inner spring, and an inner summer, and we explore how to support these monthly seasons and cycles with nutrition. We talk about the power of your bleed and how to nourish every single season with specific foods that are going to support you in your menstrual cycle. We also talk about the power of the Beyonce hormone that is estrogen and all of the components that actually play into the ebbs and flows of our emotions, of our physical energy, and of our bodies. I left this episode feeling so high. I was on fire, literally just feeling so energized and excited to bring this to you because it's so fucking important that we reclaim our cycles as women. I feel like the trajectory has been for such a long time to be disempowered, that we're a victim, that we have to put up with bleeding every month, but there is so much power in it, and I cannot wait for you to just see and drink in all of this knowledge from this episode. If you have a girlfriend who you feel like you want to send this episode to, please, please, please do. It is my mission to empower women within their bodies and within their cycles. And so if this resonates with you, if you fucking love this episode, if your jaw was on the floor listening to this, please, please, please do share the love, because it is vital. It is so important that we all empower one another to reclaim these pieces of us that we were never taught to as children. So that's where I'm going to leave it. I hope that you enjoy, and be sure to give us a rating, and I'm sending you so much love. Giulietta, welcome to Wild and Untamed. It is such a joy to have you with us today to bring all of your womb wisdom, your hormonal wisdom, your cyclical wisdom. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. And yeah, I'm so excited for this conversation and just to see how it unfolds. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. I mean, so with my clients and doing like the ethereal spiritual realms of the womb work, I get so many questions about how to physically support the womb, and just to share a little bit of a background as to how Giulietta and I came into contact with one another. I had some really peculiar physical womb stuff happen that I experienced towards the end of last year, which pretty much involved my cervix dropping to the entrance of my vagina and being really soft and pillowy, and essentially birthing something, right? And it was really disconcerting. There was passing of a cervical plug and all sorts of weird bleeding, clotting, and all of these physical symptoms that I'd never experienced before. And it led me to going down the natural route of modern medicine to see if there was anything physically wrong, had all of the scans and all of the things, and they had no answers because I was within the normal range. And it led me to reach out to Giulietta for support because it kind of guided me to hormonal imbalances. And it was a high serum prolactin, which for anybody listening, that is what is produced in the body when you're breastfeeding, essentially. So a lot of birth symptoms, and the reason that I love what you do and all of the work that we've done together so far is really, I love how you connect the spiritual, the physical, and then you like bring the science in as well. And I get so many women asking like how they can support their cycles with different food and herbs and all of these things. So I'm so excited to really drop into that with you today because you've been such a great support for me, and like you're so full of all of the wisdom and the knowledge.
Thank you. Yes. And I really think that's kind of like you've really summarized my work. Like there's this like real science base to it, because at heart I'm a science geek, but there's also like there's the witch side, and I don't see them as contradicting each other. I see them as being having this beautiful marriage between them, right? And just sort of like accessing all of the things that are going to like serve our hormone health, and I love to be able to offer practical advice, and real like practical things. But I feel that then that's the base like of what the work you do, and then if you imagine it as a tree or whatever, those are the roots, and then you kind of the rest of the tree is maybe the more spiritual practices, the womb connection, maybe the womb healing, but it is really important, like you say, when someone comes to me and they're like, I just want to know what's going on, that I can give them these kind of answers or pointers, or at least we can go a bit deeper. And I'm so grateful to have that real science geek part to me as well, because I'd be like, right, let's go and do some testing. Let's see what's going on, and then really step back. And it's so interesting, like if we talk about what happened with you and the prolactin, right? And obviously you're very in touch with your body and your womb, and you were talking about all these like all the birthing symptoms, but all these sensations that you were going through, and then we have this very physical result, like a blood result, that's like your body thinks it's birthing something. We know, like, and it was so interesting to see that coming together, and then trying to dig deeper to see what was going on, and yeah, that for me is where the real satisfaction comes, because at least we can unravel and go, okay, so it's not this, it's not that, it's nothing, it's nothing, shall we say, serious in inverted commas, you know what I mean? We've crossed all that out, and now we can really like unpick what it is and support you with food, like with nutrition, with supplements, with everything else as well. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but that's what I love to do.
No, I love it. And I love your passion for it, because I think that that's so important as well. And especially with this work, I think that there is so much that modern, like Western medicine doesn't actually identify, like, and it doesn't actually give support in. And there's a little bit, honestly, I've experienced a lot of gaslighting with that. And obviously this isn't to slag off the whole of Western medicine, because it definitely has a place in terms of being able to identify what's going on, and there's incredible people doing incredible things, and it's not the practice of optimal health, it's the practice of medicine, and it's very different. So what we've done, like, you got me tested with everything under the sun to just and it gave so much detail. And so I really want to encourage anybody who's listening, if you're going through any health stuff, or if you're experiencing not receiving any answers truly, because it can feel yes, relief if you get a test result and they're like, no, there's nothing wrong. But you're in your body and in your like your heart, you know that there's something not quite right.
Mm,
Seek holistic support. And that's essentially what you do. You like when you were saying that you zoom out and you look at the
mm,
whole picture
mm,
from the scientific point of view and the metaphysical and the spiritual, because
mm,
it is, especially when it comes to women's hormonal health and especially womb stuff, when we're going to go into cycles and bleeds and all of that
mm,
beautiful stuff, there's not a lot of actual research that's been done to date
mm,
in
mm.
those realms. And
Yeah.
so that's publicly acknowledged, to my knowledge, within
Mm, mm,
the
mm.
medicine. So we
Yeah.
are given more answers in holistic practices and alternative testing, which is what you have gone
Yeah.
into with me.
Yeah. And you're so right, because I think there is this element of gaslighting, and like you, I'm not here to denigrate like modern medicine, because it has its place and
Mm-hmm.
it's a lifesaver, right, which is beautiful, but it's very good at that acute moment when you need that operation or whatever, but it's just not so good at the preventative stuff or the optimization, like you say. So, and I feel that women's hormonal health is probably one of the areas that has been really ignored, like massively, because nothing has changed since the pill was kind of discovered, invented, put together,
Yeah.
really, like in the 1930s. And then we really started taking it seriously, like as a world population, like in the 60s and 70s. But the pill became the cure all for everything. And it was
Mm-hmm.
just like, if you presented with bad PMS, if you presented with period pain, if you presented with acne, the solution for all of that was take the pill. That was
Yeah.
it. And there's been absolutely no interest, unfortunately, in that world to ask the question, why is this happening? Why is this woman having this? Or how else can we support her? Because it's literally take the pill, take the pill, take the pill. And that's kind of, it's just got stuck. It's like frozen in time,
Yeah.
and like it's, for me, that was part of my journey, that frustration and complete and utter like feelings, like a feeling of total disempowerment when I went to the doctor and I was like, I have fibroids. How can I support myself? And it was like, take the pill. And I'd already done the pill
Mm-hmm.
years ago. And I was like, I am not touching that with a barge pole, And
Yeah.
I was just left there on my own, like totally on my own. And that was a moment when I was like, there have to be different ways of dealing with this. And that's what started the journey. And part of like really lies at the like my real core like passion and desire is to let women know that you're not alone. There are other solutions. There are ways of digging deeper that actually are like really founded in science, right? Because you know that the testing we've done is scientific. It's
Oh,
not
yeah.
me like wandering around with a crystal on your head, right? I mean, I'd
Yeah.
love to do that
Not
as
that,
well, but
yes. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that, because I'm balls to the
absolutely
walls
not.
in. I'm down for
Yeah.
that.
But like the stuff is out there. It's just not, unfortunately, available to us in especially in the UK, in all over the world. It's not available through your healthcare system, so you've always got to do things privately through private laboratories, pay money for it, and all of this, which I also find extremely frustrating, because it's like, only if you only women of lower income or whatever, they don't have access to any of this help either. And that really, we spend like, I don't know what the NHS in the UK spends on all sorts of other things, which I feel a complete waste of money, when how wonderful would it be if every woman could get a Dutch test, which is the test that we did together, right?
Yeah.
Like, so much better than all of this other nonsense. But yeah, so it saddens me that it's not available for everyone. And but it's really important to say that there are so many other ways of finding answers, and that we have to really, whenever we sit there and we know, like you said, your test results come back and you're told you're fine, you're normal, but you're sitting there and you're just like, oh yeah, but I just feel that there's something not right. It's like trusting that instinct
Yeah.
and saying, thank you very much. I'm now going to go on my own journey, and I'm going to go and find out. And luckily nowadays, with social media, with everything else, we can really empower ourselves. And all you need to do is start asking questions, in wherever, in Facebook groups, or ask Google, or hashtag things on Instagram, and you will find people who can help you, which is just incredible, really. And really, I'm so grateful that has been one of the most positive things of the whole, you know, world opening to technology.
Yeah, like one of the huge gifts of social media, with everything being so accessible if you're willing to go down all of the rabbit holes.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
just to share with you, like the piece with the pill as well, like I remember I was young as well. I was like 16,
Mm,
having really heavy periods, and they gave me the pill. And then continuing with really, really heavy periods. And again, we're told that that's a problem. Like, I think that my issue with how women's health is often approached is, to your point, just take the pill, like it's a problem, like
yeah,
it's an
yeah.
inconvenient problem, fix it so that then we regulate and kind of actually get rid of all of the beautiful ebbs and
Yeah.
flows that we actually move through in our hormonal cycle, that each have their own gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And gosh, I had the implant, and then I had a constant bleed for about a year. And then I
Mm.
went to my doctor and was like, hey, I don't think I should be bleeding with this. They gave me the pill on top of that. And I was a freaking Fruit Loop. I was like, my boyfriend at the time was like, oh my God, you were insane. Like, I can't deal with this. And I think that this is something that I really want to drill home as well. Like, taking a hormone, a foreign hormone, to try and balance out hormones that are naturally ebbing and flowing and changing,
Mm.
I don't feel is natural. Because I feel like
Mm.
as soon as you pump yourself full of one thing, it throws everything else out of balance, or it numbs or dulls, and you don't, like I said, have access to those gifts. So I would really love if you're open to sharing just like what we actually move through, like the seasons of
Mm.
the female hormones throughout the month, and like what kind of gifts there are within each of those, and just
Mm.
give a little breakdown about, okay, this is what's happening while you're bleeding, because I think
Yeah.
so many women don't know.
Yeah. Yes, 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 yes. And I would love to start by just saying that there's this real fear around feeling differently. And there's a lot of narratives that we have ourselves, like, and it's all to do with, like, we have internalized patriarchy. We unfortunately live in, I'm not going to bang on and on about the patriarchy, although I could, but I won't. We live in a world that is set up for men's hormones. And if you've ever looked at a
Yeah.
male hormone chart, it's literally testosterone peaks in the morning and comes down at night, peaks in the morning and comes down at night. That is literally it for the entire month. So men live in a 24-hour hormone cycle.
Mm-hmm.
We don't. We live in a 28-day cycle. So this is huge, right? But we are always trying to fit into this daily cycle that just doesn't work for us.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, I think there's a lot of like shame when we feel differently. There's a lot of like, what's wrong with me? Like, that's one of the big questions that I'm always like, there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah. I
you
mean,
know, you're
sorry.
hormonal. No. Yeah, it's because we're passionate about this, right? And it's like, there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong. And I find that's again one of the core sort of principles that I go back to all the time. I have a chart that I sort of quite regularly post on my Instagram and send out, which is a chart of female hormones throughout the month. And I'm just like, look at this chart. If you look at
Yeah.
this and look at all the waves, the beautiful undulating waves, these waves influence our behavior. They influence the foods we want to eat. They influence our mood. They influence the way we sleep. They influence the way we dress. Like, they influence everything. So how
Mm-hmm.
can we possibly feel the same every day? This is my big question. So then, to go into the seasons, like the
Mm-hmm.
actual 4 phases, we have four. Yeah, generally a cycle is for 28 days, but if your cycle is a bit shorter or longer, that's absolutely fine too. But we generally have 4 different phases where the hormones change every month. And the hormones I'm talking about primarily are estrogen and progesterone. Those are the two like major reproductive hormones in women.
Mm-hmm.
If we think about estrogen, Maisie Hill, who wrote Period Power, calls it the Beyonce hormone, right? So,
I love
estrogen is
that.
like, woo, she's like, hey, boys, like just think about Beyonce when you think about estrogen. You're very much here wanting to be seen, skin glowing, all of the things.
Mhm.
Um, and then progesterone is more, I like to kind of call it the more like Dalai Lama hormone. It's much calmer, it's much more chilled.
Mhm.
It's got more of an earthy grounding element to it.
Mm.
Quite focused. It's quite a nice feeling, that progesterone. And the thing about estrogen and progesterone is they are yin yangy, right? So you need one to calm the other one, and you need them both to work synergistically. And this is what we see throughout a female cycle every month. We see this dance between estrogen and progesterone throughout the month. So let's now go into the phases. So the first phase, I love to like work with the inner seasons model. I love talking about them in
Me
terms of
too.
seasons,
Yes.
because like I feel it makes the official scientific terms are like menstruation, follicular, ovulatory, luteal, which are lovely, but they don't
Mhm.
mean much to most people, right? Like it took me years to get my head around follicular and luteal. I used to get them mixed up all
Me
the time.
too. Me too. I was like, wait, no, I would always get them mixed up. But I think to your point, using the seasons, because we have lived experience of the
Yeah,
annual seasons. So we can, and it's a kind of similar energy, like when you go into it. Um, there's a kind of a similar energy that you feel in winter,
yeah,
spring, summer, and autumn that's then reflected, and it helps you, or at least it helped me to gauge when I was learning about all of this,
yeah,
the macro to micro, like, oh, okay, now I
yeah.
understand.
And also, what I love about it is not only the connection that it forges between ourselves and nature, the planet, and everything else, but also it really hands over like power to us. You don't need to like go and study loads. Of course, you can geek out. Of course, you can read all of the books, but you know how you feel in winter, so you
Mhm.
can always go, okay, well, I know that winter makes me feel like this. How does the inner winter express itself for me? Oh, that's interesting, these similarities, right? So it really, like, it's a model that you can just connect with
Yeah.
on a very deep level very quickly without thinking, oh, I don't know enough or whatever. We all know how we feel when it's spring outside. I mean, it's currently sort of snowing at the moment, so interesting metaphor.
I know, which I did not sign up for. I was ready for spring.
Wow,
And
but
then
it's
it
so funny you
snowed.
say that, because in a spring, and I'll touch on that in a minute, can be a bit of a like delicate, fragile time. And I feel that spring, this weather we're having at the moment, is such a beautiful reminder of how spring can be a little bit turbulent, and it's not always like this beautiful, just like sunny day after sunny, not in the UK anyway, right? So
Yeah.
but let's rewind to inner winter. So, inner winter is our bleed, menstruation. It's when we are physically, obviously releasing that endometrial lining, that womb lining, and we're bleeding. And hormones are at their lowest. So, estrogen and progesterone are at their lowest, which is a beautiful reflection for what's going on outside. Everything appears to be very still. It is very much a season of going inwards, of stillness. But like those trees are doing things like underground, right? So
Mm.
I always love thinking about asking myself the question, like, what leaves do I want to grow this cycle? What, and just asking the questions. It's not a season of doing much. It's just a season of asking questions, sinking into the stillness. And when you've got this, like these low hormones, maybe traditionally would have thought, oh, I've got no energy. Oh, I'm feeling like this. But
Mhm.
I invite you to think about, well, what is the superpower here? Where is the, how can I really reframe this? And like, I love the stillness of this time, because compared to other points in the cycle, I can sit there and like literally stare out the window for 3 hours and not have a single crazy thought. I can just
Yeah.
like listen to music or meditate and just really sink into that depth that sometimes at other points is quite challenging.
Yeah.
So that at my, every inner season has a superpower or many superpowers.
Yeah.
But absolutely, that stillness for me is like a real gift at this time.
And
Um,
also, I just want to
mm,
expand on that a little bit as well, especially. to expand upon the disempowerment around the actual bleed time from a spiritual perspective, the veil between worlds. So if we're right now in our 3D physical bodies, and then the other realms are connecting to our highest selves or connecting to the divine. It's actually the original menstruation or bleeding was the original shamanic journeying. So in this quiet time, it's really beautiful time to just sit with yourself. And you were sharing with me before we dropped in that you would, because you're bleeding right now, you were receiving loads of beautiful downloads. And this is a really sacred time for us as women. And I really want to just invite that reframe. If you dread your bleed every month, to your point, seeing all of these gifts that we can pull from it, this is one of the most beautiful spiritual times that we can experience. And you've been working with like a virtual red tent.
Yes,
Haven't you?
yes.
Just, I know we're going off a little bit, but I want to hear more about it while we're like in the season.
I was just thinking about them as well. So yes, I have been very drawn recently to creating a space where women who are bleeding can come to be held in sacred ceremony, because like this was such, like you say, this is like the shamanic journey. This like traditionally before menstruation started becoming taboo, or women started being thought of as unclean. Before all of this, menstruation was seen as a deeply sacred time, not just for women, but for the entire tribe. It was where women went collectively to bleed, because in those days our bleeds, we used to bleed together because obviously we were so much more connected with the moon, that, you know, we didn't like live in houses with lots of lights on and things, and women just would retire physically to this beautiful tent and bleed collectively, you know, like, and just rest, replenish, receive the downloads. You know, I mean, it's incredible, right? Like when you first read this stuff, and I think what it is about it is like when you first hear this stuff, there's this deep knowing inside you. You're just like, oh, okay, yes, you know, it just makes sense. And yeah, I've just been really drawn to holding virtual ceremonies for women, and I've been doing it all of March, every Saturday morning. It's been so beautiful, so powerful. Like it's just like the energy, even if it's like it's a Zoom room, you can still feel it, like, so powerful. And just sorry, carry on.
No, I was just going to say that especially as we're moving more into like a high frequency in terms of collective, we're moving, like there's definitely this shift. Just being in Zoom space, your fields are connecting. Like there's higher realms where you're connecting. And especially if you're all open, I think people can sometimes actually overlook the power of the virtual. And that's actually a gift, I think, that came from all of the lockdowns and stuff, is that we've had to almost cultivate the power to expand our fields and actually connect more to that, like, I want to say almost like telepathic connection that actually is within us, which we use computers and Zooms and stuff for. But as soon as you go into especially a ceremony of a load of women on their bleed, that's a lot of power. And you really feel it.
100%. Like you just like, you know, the minute you come in there, and it's so beautiful because all the women are like lying there with blankets and just like just so comfortable and cozy, and just guiding them through like 2 hours of meditation, you know, like just like connecting with their womb space, accessing their intuition, maybe releasing, you know, like, and then coming back into a circle, sharing, witnessing each other, releasing together. I mean, just incredibly powerful, and you know, something that I would, you know, just I would love just for it to be a thing everywhere. You know.
I want to bring back the physical, like meeting, like the physical red tents, because there's so much power in that. Like what a gift for every town in the world to have a designated red tent. Like that would be life-changing.
The dream, right? And it's like, it's something that keeps on coming through to me, and my conscious mind is like don't be ridiculous. Do you know how much work that's going to be? And then like, you know, like my spirit or my soul is like, yes, but we need to do it. Like,
Yeah. We gotta do it. We gotta find a way. There's gonna be a way.
you know, I'm even like, I wonder if I could apply for like a government loan or something. Like, could
Yeah.
I ask, you know, if they're happy to like donate money for this? And I'm just feeling into it at the moment, and I'm trying not to get overwhelmed with the logistics, because it's a very interesting experience
Mhm.
to hold an event that is entirely dictated by the menstrual cycle. So for me, setting it all up was very strange, because, you know, most women weren't booking in until the last minute, because it's like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be bleeding this week or next week, and you're sort of like, oh, you know, it felt very different, but it also felt
Yeah.
really amazing to just trust that the women were going to come on the day they needed to come or felt called to come. And it really shifted how I run an event, which I really loved as well. It was so different to what anything I've ever done before. So yeah, but it really does, that very masculine like need for structure and certainty. I had to just
Yeah.
surrender and go, okay, I
Yeah.
trust that this will happen.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. And I love the vision, and I'm holding that vision for
Yeah,
the red tents. I feel
thank
like,
you.
yes, beautiful.
Yeah, I think they're going to happen. It's just a question of just sitting with it and just really just allowing the, you know, the whatever it is has to come through. And I feel it will happen, because there isn't a single woman I've talked to who hasn't said, oh my god, that would be amazing. Everybody is like, yes, we
Yeah.
need one in every town. It's like, you know, it's almost like having like a McDonald's franchise, but a red tent franchise, right? It's like,
I mean,
you know,
there is a red M.
McDonald's.
Can we kick them out? No,
Yeah, yeah. Can you
we're
imagine?
moving in, guys.
Yeah.
No, it's a golden M, isn't it? Damn
It's
it.
a
It used to
golden
be
M. We
red.
would change it to red,
To
and then it would be
red.
like it would be a
A red
menstrual
tent.
M. Yeah.
Yes. If anyone works for McDonald's who's listening,
Yes, please
we're coming
go
in.
and talk to your yeah, go and talk to your the board members or
Oh my
something.
gosh. Brilliant. Okay, so just to bring us back, we were dropping into the gifts of winter, the stillness, and both hormones, both progesterone and estrogen, being at their lowest levels. So what
Mm-hmm.
would be, I know for me, whenever I'm bleeding, I always want to be in a dark bath. I want to be in a bath.
Mm,
I want to be surrounded by
mm,
candles, almost surrounding myself in a womb
yeah.
space. So, how can people support themselves? Maybe, are there any foods that you would
Mm,
recommend, or any little rituals that people could bring in to
mm,
really holding themselves through this
mm.
phase of their cycle?
Yes. So I love using food to anchor us into our different phases of the cycle. And I feel that instinctively we know what we want, but we've been so conditioned into potentially the diet mentality or the restrictive kind of eating or whatever, that we struggle to really connect with that intuitive like eating sort of that we could potentially do. So what I love, for example, during our bleeds, is increasing iron-rich foods. Like, this is like super simple, and it makes real sense. But quite often, you know, I mean, we are losing a lot of iron, right? We're losing blood, so let's replace that. And I love that one as a really simple, foundational, like a nutritional kind of like little habit to put in place. So, what does that look like? You know, you can maybe make yourself, you might not want like a smoothie, so you might want to do like more like a green soup or something. Or you might want to do, if you're a meat eater, make yourself like a beautiful stew, like a organic beef stew or something. So iron rich foods are amazing. We also lose other minerals. We lose a lot of iodine. So I love things like seaweed at this time, because the seaweed really helps replenish minerals and iodine in particular. So I one of my favorite like in a winter foods is a miso soup with like loads of extra seaweed on top, just because the miso also contains like tofu that has a little bit of estrogen in it, so it gives you that little bit of an estrogen boost. A lot of miso can have like edamame beans, which are a little bit like estrogen rich as well. Then I throw in my seaweed, and it's just like a nourishing broth. And if you think about it, what do we crave the most in winter? It's warm and it's comforting, right? So
Mhm.
if you want to throw out all the rules and not worry about anything, just really go for those warming, comforting foods, those ones that make you just feel so delicious. You know what I mean? When you just curl up and you just have this
Mm.
bowl of something steaming and hot, that is really like the guidance, and you can then get a bit more specific if you want to. But I would definitely say, if you're somebody who feels very tired, think about that iron, think about the iodine. And yeah, these beautiful bowls of soups and things like that are just so nourishing. I think for me, the word at this time is always nourishing, 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 and
Mm.
just like, you just want to walk away thinking or feeling like, that
Yes,
feeling.
yes, I know exactly. Like
Yeah.
anything warm,
Mhm.
anything just, yeah, soups, stews,
Yeah.
like cozy
Cozy.
blankets,
Yeah. Yeah.
baths, like anything
Absolutely.
that makes you just feel that warm
Yes. Yes.
nourishment.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think it's sometimes we can get a bit too like, oh, should I do this or that? It's just like, tap into your body and just go, okay, so what do I feel like? Not what I think I should be having, but what do I feel like having? And sometimes that comes up as a bit of a weird one, but like, be curious with it and see where it takes you, and just kind of enjoy it. And just, what I love about eating for your cycle is it helps us start working through things like guilt and not trusting our bodies and its signals, because we understand a bit more what hormonally we need. And then it's almost like that permission slip finally to kind of
Yeah.
go, I can eat this, okay, because it's almost like we're waiting for somebody to tell us, yes, it's okay to eat a bit more now. And we will definitely talk about that in autumn, because that's that real phase, I feel, where there's a lot of exploration to do around appetite and hunger and cravings and all of the things.
Oh my gosh, me right now. I physically ran down the road yesterday to get cake because the shop was closing. And I know that you'll be like, oh my gosh, Laura, that's not on the plan. But I was just like, I really want cake and I'm about to bleed and I can feel it. My appetite
Mm.
goes up. I always like my chocolate craving is actually always autumn. It's always my inner
Mm-hmm,
autumn.
mm-hmm.
It's actually not when I'm bleeding. So
Yeah, yeah.
when we get to full, we'll go into
We will
we'll
go
go
into
into
that.
that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so in a spring, what's going on with the hormones in spring?
So spring, estrogen is starting to rise, progesterone is still low. So what does this mean? It means Beyonce is waking up, right? So, all of a sudden you're like, oh, today I'm not going to wear that baggy jumper. I actually feel like wearing something a little bit more, you know, just maybe a dress, or you start just coming out of your shell a little bit. You start maybe wanting to put on more makeup, like all of a sudden you're a bit more interested in the outside world.
Yes.
Energy is starting to rise. It's inner spring as we are having this it's spring as we're having this conversation, right?
Yeah.
So, and we had a wonderful week of sunshine last week in the UK, and we had our call then, and we were both like, oh, this is beautiful. It's that kind of feeling. But
Yeah.
there is like, it's not linear. There is a fragility about inner spring sometimes. The temptation to really come back in the world is huge, because that's the conditioning of come back, like back in the room, come and people please and do all this. And it's very much like, ease yourself back into spring. Just still prioritize rest, look after yourself, like really, because it's a bit heady sometimes. You're like, oh, I feel great. And then we overdo it and we end up kind of going a bit backwards and sort of like struggling a little bit. But definitely that estrogen is rising. So we're just feeling much more energized and much more, we're starting to think about life again. Does that make sense? Sort of like,
Yeah.
oh yes, I'm thinking about my business. Like sometimes when I'm bleeding, I'm like, I can't even think about my business, and that's okay. I'm just gonna sit here, and things might land and they might not. I don't really care. And then all of
Yeah.
a sudden you're like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. It's that kind of sensation.
It makes me
We're
think of
also,
snowdrops, like because
yeah.
with the spring, it makes me, I don't know where else in the world they have snowdrops, but like these like tiny little delicate flowers that just start
Mm,
to push through at the beginning of spring. And then, especially with snowdrops, I've seen snow on snowdrops as well.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's that beautiful fragility, but still
Mm-hmm.
mm,
Yeah.
like, yes, there's new life coming, but also it's really delicate still.
Yes. Yeah. And that is literally such a beautiful, snowdrops are a beautiful metaphor for inner spring. Like
Yeah.
there's life coming, but it's delicate. So just, don't like overdo it. Just kind of come ease yourself into it gently. Yeah. And obviously, as estrogen starts rising, estrogen, in terms of like appetite, is an appetite suppressant. So it's naturally, we just don't want to eat as much when estrogen is rising. So you may notice as you come into inner spring, you're a bit more like, oh, I just not really that hungry anymore. Like this really peaks in inner summer when we are ovulating and our estrogen is at its highest. We're just like, oh, I'm just not very hungry today. Those days when you can have a smoothie, maybe have a salad like 7 hours later and you're like, oh, I'm okay. You know what I mean?
I'm
Whereas
alive, I'm
3
celebrating.
days ago you were like running for cake or whatever, like
Running
or
for
you will be running
cake.
for cake in a few weeks time.
1 week's time, I'll be legging it down that road for cake.
But I love that because it's like there is a time for everything in the cycle, and especially with nutrition, like there's a time for eating really fresh light foods, and there's a time for comfort foods. And when we know that, and when we trust that, that completely just reframes and reorganizes the way we approach our nutrition, right? Because there's this element of like, it's okay, I know where I am now. So in terms of foods to eat now, I wouldn't recommend going for the super light salads yet. You're still needing that energy to come back. So probably shifting a little bit from like the real like hearty warming soups to more like slightly lighter and fresher, some more grilled stuff,
Like stir
like
fries,
stir fried,
maybe.
steamed veg, all of those things. Still a bit of warmth in there, it's still needed. We're building up for ovulation, so we need like good fats in there, so plenty of avocados, plenty of olives, or good olive oil, because the ovulation is very energy demanding, so we need to make sure we're really feeding ourselves now. The temptation again could be to go a bit too light at this time, but it doesn't have to be that really heavy food. It is this transition to lighter stuff at this point.
Yeah.
And we also need to detox the estrogen. Sorry, I just wanted to say this quickly.
Yeah.
So as estrogen builds, as wonderful as it is, we need to pull it out of our system as well. If it doesn't get pulled out, it hangs around and can then really cause a bit of havoc later on in the cycle, in that inner autumn. So now is a time to eat foods that really help to pull out estrogen. So I love things like broccoli sprouts, all those vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, what we call the cruciferous veg, are wonderful at this time. Fermented foods like kimchi, sauerkraut, even kombucha, they are all very lovely for just helping us to pull out a bit of estrogen, because as it's building, we want it to just slowly also be recycled and come out of our body. So that's a really lovely one. I love buying myself, in an ideal world, I would make my own sauerkraut, but I can never be bothered, full disclosure. So I just buy it. Buy myself a big jar of sauerkraut, and I just always have a couple of dollops with every meal, like during my inner spring. And I love doing that because that's a real like, okay, this is acknowledging that I'm in my spring kind of thing.
I love that. And there was a piece that I wanted to offer a reframe of as well, because you touched upon diet culture and all of those pieces and the pressures that we've received as women from society and media and all of that. And I feel like one of the parts that scares us as women is actually the word cravings, or when we start to feel a craving, there's almost an element of feeling out of control. And there's a little bit of a word, I feel like there's a little bit of shame around, oh, I'm just craving this, right? Oh, I'm just craving that. But I really want to invite you to track your cycles, if you're listening, to track your cycle and to just listen to your body and listen to what it's craving. Like if that looks like running down the road for cake, that's okay, because you're not doing it every day, right?
Exactly.
Like it's when we have a craving, it's not necessarily an everyday craving that then gets shamed for you eat like shit or whatever it is, like whatever the story is around craving, really embracing it when it comes up, because then you're satiated and I probably won't crave cake for a whole other month. Like, so when you go and you meet these cravings, you actually let your body guide you. I know I'm saying cake again, but not the healthiest. But at the same time, everything in
Yeah.
moderation, and
Yeah.
really letting yourself listen, giving yourself full permission to just, even if you try it for a month, what are you
Mhm.
craving? Make a note, listen, see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love everything you've said, and especially this idea going back to the diet culture, because the fundamental message from the diet culture is that we cannot trust ourselves.
Yeah.
We need them to guide us, right? We just cannot, we're not to be trusted. Like, if you don't follow a diet, you don't know what to
Irresponsible.
do. Yeah, yeah. And it's this fear, like, where did the calorie counting thing, it's always this sense of regaining control, because the worst thing that could possibly happen is you get these cravings and you're never ever going to stop eating. That is the ultimate message behind a lot of diet culture.
Yeah.
And for anybody who's resonating with this, I really invite you to look into the concept of intuitive eating. Like, this is like huge in the intuitive eating world, and it's so interesting, all the messages that are coming from. But what I love is, like I said already, when you bring it back to the menstrual cycle, it's like, this is where your intuition lies, and it's like trusting it again. And you realize it's absolute rubbish that you're going to have the cravings. I mean, some people, they may have other issues going on, and you may have other cravings all the time, and that deserves to be looked at in different ways, of course. But if it's like your classic craving in your menstrual cycle, it happens 1 or 2 days a month, like you say, lean into it. Ask what's going on. What food do you want? Like, I feel like we have to talk about inner autumn now, because it's coming again.
I know it's coming back. Okay, yeah, we're not going in order, but we're going with the feminine flow.
Yes,
Why
we'll
the
go
fuck
with the
not?
flow, and then we will come back to summer.
Yes.
But right, like, so this is that week before our periods, and hormonally everything's a little bit all over the place. Estrogen drops after ovulation, then comes up again, and then drops, and then progesterone does this slow steady rise and comes down again. So it's always the messiest part in terms of what's happening with the cycle. And like, it's kind of like where everything gets dumped. So, like, if you've had high stress, if you haven't, like, really, like, if you haven't slept properly, all of these things tend to then show themselves up in the autumn. And in terms of food, first of all, what I'll tell you is we actually do need to eat more. Physiologically, we need more calories. Now, I hate not hate, but it's not my thing. I never talk about counting calories, but this is important, because actually, on a very, like, fundamental biological level, we need to eat more at this time. We need almost 200 calories more a day at this point in our cycle, because we're getting ready to menstruate. And that is energetically really demanding. And we just ovulated. So this is like, inner autumn is between two, like, really big pivotal energy moments in the cycle. So we need to eat 200 calories more a day. But because of diet culture and everything else, we feel that insatiable hunger, and we're like, oh, I need to suppress it. Oh my goodness, if I give into this, that's it. I'm never going to stop eating, blah, 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 right? And
Yeah.
I love inner autumn, because for me, my challenge, and the challenge I say to my clients, is, can you make yourself the biggest, most delicious meal, snack, cake, whatever it is, that is going to make, the challenge is to feel so satisfied that the craving is gone. How, have we ever done that? Have you ever tried to, like, really embrace that craving and just kind of go, I'm done now, actually. You know what I mean?
Yes. It's like a full permission slip, and I fucking love that you've just presenced that, because that chaos, like, and especially in the realms as well that I navigate, is a lot to do with the emotions. And I always notice that the again, there's shame around PMS, right? That autumn phase where your emotions are also potentially reflecting the chaos of the hormones, like the ups, the downs, the heightened, it's like the inner wild woman phase. I find myself being a lot more just like feral, honestly, like a lot more feral, because there's so much going on in the body. And I find that whatever has needed to come up in the month gets processed in that week, and then it gets released in the bleed. So it's emotionally as well, I want to give everyone a permission slip. We're handing out permission slips like Oprah here. But to feel all of the fucking highs and lows, feel all the feelings, know that you're not crazy, know that PMS is not anything to be ashamed of, just fully embrace that, okay, yeah, I'm pissed off at this. Mental note, it's coming up so I can release it with my bleed, and bringing that intention in for, okay, whatever's coming up in this inner autumn phase is what's actually asking for me to see it so I can then release it. And then fueling that as well, because if you're processing emotions, I get really hungry. Like if you're moving through a lot of intense emotions, you want to feed that as well. So from a physical level, from a hormonal level, from an emotional level, full, huge, fat, juicy permission slip to just feed and nourish yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the whole PMS thing, like I saw somebody talk about it recently, and they called it "Please Make Space," and it's so good, right? Because it is that. It's like, like hormonally as well. When our estrogen drops, like I've said already, estrogen it's the people pleasing hormone. Like when we're high on estrogen, you may have noticed when you're ovulating, you say yes to everything. Like we're all like, yes, 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 yes. I can do everything. No worries. I'll take it all on. And that is like that's really who society loves the most, the estrogen fueled woman, right? Because she is very like, says yes to everything, people pleaser extraordinaire, mother archetype, all of these things going on. So then all of a sudden we crash land out of that, and we're not putting up with any more of that shit anymore. And so there's all these stories, external stories are like, well, like you're not the people pleaser anymore. And we've taken on this shame around, speaking our truth, being pissed off, having arguments. Like so many of my clients are like, oh, I had an argument with my husband, I feel terrible, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, let's just pause a minute. What's going on here? Like, what did he do? And it's like, usually he hasn't done the dishes. That's one of the big ones.
Usually. This is exhibit A.
I love how the dishes are always a bit of a metaphor for like what's happening in relationship. It just makes me die. But it's like, it's okay to be pissed off and pause and think, what is this telling me? Is this actually something that I need to think about the rest of my cycle? Because I'm actually a bit blinded by my estrogen goggles the rest of the time. Is this the truth here? And what can I do about it? And, and that relates to everything, like that permission slip, like say, eating, nourishing yourself more. We want to eat more carbs at this time. We want a bit more sugar. And it's all good. It's all fine, just like maybe what we can do is like, what's the best way I can eat the carbs, so maybe you can make yourself like your own brownies. And sometimes that's not even a thing. Like you just have to go and get the cake, and that's also okay. And you come back and you're like, I've eaten the fucking cake, I'm good now. You know what I mean? Like
they also gave me a free piece, so I had all of the cake.
They must have known you. They were like, there comes a wild woman.
I literally did, because I called ahead and I was like, what time do you close? They were like 10 minutes. And so I literally ran, and then I burst in and they were like, we've been asked to put some cake aside for you. And then
love that.
And I was like, look, she told me I should just come back tomorrow, but I'm about to bleed, so I really need the cake now. And she went, okay, I understand, and put an extra piece.
I love that. I love that so much.
She was like, I understand. I was
like, yeah, exactly, right? Exactly.
Yeah. I also feel like I really love a risotto in my autumn phase. Like, but something that you'd shared with me as well, which I love, the little hack, the pre-carb hack. The pre-carb hack.
Yeah, we can do this. So just to say, our blood sugar goes a little bit wonkier at this time. So those cravings are there for many reasons, but one of them just is that our blood sugar can be a bit more wobbly. And so it's to crave those extra carbs is fine. And I encourage you to bring in more like rice and sweet potato and quinoa and even pasta, like these foods that are sometimes demonized, like bring them in and just enjoy them. But then we can do all these little hacks beforehand, right? So one of the ones we talked about is some apple cider vinegar beforehand, like a shot of apple cider vinegar, which really calm down that blood sugar, or a serving of some kind of vegetable, like a salad or something. And then it completely changes how your blood sugar behaves. So we can still put in these amazing, like biochemical hacks, you know what I mean, and still enjoy all of the pasta and everything else. So it's just such a different approach to it all, rather than sitting there, I don't know, with like some horrible slim fast shake or something, you know, or whatever, and just kind of going, I'm fine, you know, like. And it's there's, you know, I think that that's really changing now, but we still have this real like discomfort, and it's always like this, like, oh my gosh, you know, like mistrust when we do give in to cravings. It's just some very deep work, and I think it's like it's ancestral as well, because it's been going on for such a long time.
Yeah, it's so deeply ingrained, I feel like, in us. And there's been, I think, as women, diet culture hasn't, it's not just confined to the last like 20-30 years. It's been going on for a while, of a pressure for a woman to look a certain way, present herself a certain way, not to eat too much in front of you know people, because you would be seen as like, I don't know, feral. Feral.
It's so true though, you know, like I know women who don't feel comfortable eating in public, or when they go to restaurants, and they will order, you know, like fish and a little bit of vegetables, because don't want to be judged on eating food or whatever. And I know certainly women have shared with me, when you go out with a group of female friends, that's when they feel the judgment is going to be at its highest, you know, like this kind of, because they're all going to be looking at each other's plates, and that's like almost like weaving in with sister wounds, and you know, it's so like, oh, you know, there's so much healing there that you know can take place. So yeah.
It reminds me of a memory, actually, when I used to model and like travel around with a group of girlfriends a lot. We were invited to this beautiful dinner. I think it was at Nobu, or it was like a really beautiful Japanese restaurant. And then these other group of girls came in to join us, and none of them were eating. Again, they were all models. None of them were eating. And we were just like asking for them to pass all the food down, all like absolutely annihilating everything. And there's something so liberating about just enjoying food, honestly, for it to bring back the joy. And I feel like everything that you're sharing with leaning into the cravings and letting yourself fully enjoy the food, and just inviting you, yes, there's so much charge around it with the sister wound and with like these ancestral pieces and the pressure, but just feeling into, in this moment, like, how would it feel for you to actually have a thriving, healthy relationship with your food and your body, without the shame, without the guilt, without the comparison, or whatever is alive for you, and just really feel into the potentiality of what it could be, or what you desire it to be.
Yeah. And using those moments, like that craving moment, to kind of go, okay, when you feel that first resistance, you know, that first moment when you're like, oh, I'm really bloody hungry and I want to eat X, pause and go, okay, here it is. And rather than like push, welcome it and see where it takes you, and go, okay, and sit there and come up, like I say, like write down the things that you want to eat the most, you know. And it's, you know, like it's so interesting, because what I also find is, maybe the first few cycles you'll be like, I want to eat like the biggest amount of shit ever, and you'll do it, and after a while your body's like, I'm done now, you know, like I actually don't want to do that anymore. And my clients will say to me, they're like, actually, I did that. I had the whatever, and now they're like, "Ooh, I really want to start looking at, I want to make myself something really delicious for my inner autumn, but really nourishing." And I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, here we are. That's when we might start making like our own, I don't know, like I love doing things like beetroot brownies or sweet potato brownies, and I make a big thing of that. And maybe you can make your own ice cream and that kind of stuff. And it starts shifting, because believe you me, although we've been conditioned to think that that's the kind of food we want, eventually, and the more in tune you come with your body will be like, I don't want that crap anymore. Actually,
Yeah.
I do still want the sweetness, and I do want something that's going to really like satisfy me, but I don't want the crap. You honestly won't. It's not something that you want after a while.
Because I think as well, the misconception with cravings is that you're craving the salt or you're craving the sugar. But actually, when we go for, and sometimes, yes, it is, but there's a misconception with the things that we think we want to crave, like the shit, the shit, name the shit. But it's not nutritionally dense. So you eat it and your body isn't satiated because, again, like refined sugar is not something that's natural for our bodies. So the only way that we know to crave it really is because we've experienced it.
Yeah.
So once you kind of figure out that actually it's maybe not the sugar that I'm craving, maybe it's actually the cacao that I'm craving because of the minerals and the nutrients in the cacao. It's not actually the sugar. So there's a lot of, I think, what's the word? Like misconceptions in terms of what we think we want to crave.
Yeah.
What we think we're craving, and actually the nutrients, the vital nutrients that our body is physically craving.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, carry on.
And so when you're moving through these cycles of, okay, yeah, I'm just going to eat this shit, and like, because it's that permission slip, right? And then what you just described with your clients of, oh, actually, I really want to nourish this, and I really want to create like something that's nutritionally dense that still serves the same role or purpose. It's a wave. It's a cycle, and it's getting to know your body. And actually, once you've tried all the things that you think you want, then you really do drop into your body and you go, okay, what do you actually want?
Yeah. And it's asking that question again and again, and trusting and going deeper every time. So the first answer might be, I want a crappy milkshake from McDonald's or whatever, you know what I mean? And then you'd have it and you're like, second time, it might be like, might be something from, I don't know, like your health food shop. The third time, and it just moves and moves and moves into like deeper levels of trusting and really listening to what you need, and you're like, oh yeah, this feels right. So it is like, and every month is an opportunity to just explore further and go further, and just like sometimes I'm like, oh, what am I going to do this inner autumn? Do you know what I mean? Like, where's it going to take me? What am I going to want? What am I going to, like, what I wonder what's going to come up for me, and how I'm going to lean into it, and how I'm going to play with it. And like recently it's been a very weird thing. I'm just loving strawberries with dark chocolate, but that's the thing that's come up recently. Really loving it. Like literally, I just keep on seeing strawberries everywhere in the autumn, and I'm like, yes, that's what I want to have. And it's like, then it moves on to something else. But that always, I have that, and then afterwards I'm like, I'm good, I'm done, I'm fine. And maybe 2 hours later, I'm not good and done, I need more. That's fine.
I call them like womb fruits. So anything that is like dark and like red, like if I'm bleeding or just coming up to bleeding, I'll stock up on like strawberries and raspberries and dark cherries and just figs and anything womby. Like it literally visually almost looks like a womb or a yoni. So I'm like, womb fruits and hibiscus tea.
Yeah, I love a bit of hibiscus, actually. So good. You've reminded me, I've got some that I need to get brewing.
Okay, so cycling back to Beyonce season in the summer, the radiant shining light. What's going on here?
Yes, so in a summer, estrogen is peaking because that's when we are ovulating, and that estrogen is really being triggered for that sort of ovulatory phase. So in terms of the sort of, you get like the ovary releases like a little follicle, and then the egg comes from there, travels down fallopian tube, and then it sits there waiting patiently for something to happen, but quite often doesn't.
This is a whole other, like a whole
Yes.
other episode of like your sexual turn on and like the different
Yeah.
waves of your actual libido and desire. Maybe that's another one
Yes,
to,
that
to
is
do.
another one. Definitely this is a time when we are at our most, we are fertile, right? Because this is the
Yeah.
only fertile window in the cycle. Very important. Lots of us have been conditioned. We were conditioned to think when we were in school or whatever that we could be pregnant all month. We most certainly can't. We can only really do it in this window, a few days before ovulation, during, and after. So what does this mean? Estrogen is at its highest, so Beyonce is at her highest, and
Mhm.
she, like we have a lot of energy, very outward kind of feel to the whole thing. Sometimes I actually feel it can feel a bit much. We can feel quite hyperactive,
Oh
like
yeah.
almost very difficult to focus on one thing. It can feel great, and it can be a beautiful time, but it can also have this kind of slightly manic feel to it
I
sometimes.
definitely feel that. I actually did a story on that the other day about
Mm,
sometimes in that when you're feeling that rush of energy,
mm,
I had noticed I could start to feel it almost like anxiety or
yeah,
almost like it's a bit too much energy or you've got
yeah.
so many ideas and you don't know where to start. So for me, just like a little tip with that is whenever I was feeling that like buildup of energy, I would just take
Mm,
myself and go for a walk. Just
yeah,
go for a walk
yeah,
to move my body, to ground, to actually
yeah.
help to level out that energy because it wants to move, right? It's
Mm,
there to activate, but
mm,
also
mm.
it can feel like a lot sometimes.
Yeah,
So I just wanted to
yeah. No, no, no.
pop
I
that
think
in.
that's a really, really beautiful observation, but also like a great kind of tip. And also, I quite like to, we talk about like um honoring the bleed, having a ceremony then, but I quite like having some kind of ovulatory ceremony or some kind of moment when we acknowledge, also the sacredness of ovulation, and
Mhm.
also use it as a bit of a check-in point, because menstruation and ovulation are the two kind of like pivotal points of the cycle when things are like happening, shall we say. The other two were
Mhm.
like build up and build down. And it's like, if we are taking a bit of time out in our bleed to receive intuitive downloads, to receive guidance for the month, etc., I love thinking about ovulation or using ovulation as a bit of a check-in, like a mid-cycle check-in, and going, okay, so how is this going? It's lovely to set all these intentions on your bleed and then just get completely swept away by estrogen and just
Yeah.
completely ignore your needs.
Saying yes
And
to all of the things.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
everything, I'll do it.
All of it. It's such a lovely time to maybe stop and go, okay, maybe you journaled, maybe you had a few words, what was it? And just pause and go, how is this going? How am I doing? Because how are you going to harness that energy? That's another really important one. Like, I love to pause before ovulation and go, what do I want to use this energy for this time?
Mm.
Maybe checking in with what came through during the bleed and going, okay, so at least there's a bit of focus, maybe just writing a word and checking in with it once in a while. Because I don't know about you, but I'll sit on my laptop. My God, there's like 1,000 things going on, 1,000 tabs open. I'm never still for more than 10 minutes. I'm answering 20 million texts. I'm like, like
It's
bouncing around. And
spinning
then
plates.
end of the day, I'm just like, what the fuck have I even achieved today? Do you know what I mean? Because it's almost too much. And it's like,
Yeah.
let me use the energy for this. It doesn't have to be something business related. It could be anything, but it's like just really channeling the energy rather than letting yourself get swept away by it is quite an important thing to kind of think about in ovulation. And honestly, really think about the yeses that you're saying, right? Because
Discernment.
just like really, and like check in with yourself, because I quite often we say yes, but not only yes in ovulation, but we say yes to things in other points of the cycle. And I mean, how many times have you said yes to stuff and then you get to the inner autumn and you're like, oh fuck, I've got to do this, like I really don't want to go, whatever it
Yeah.
is. Like, it could just be meeting friends for dinner, but actually it's got to the point where you're not in that mood anymore. So again, having that pause and going, okay, do I really want to say yes to this? And where am I going to put this in my diary? Like, just being just having that mindfulness, because it is that, I call them the estrogen goggles. We're seeing everything through this like crazy rose tinted lens, you know what I mean? Which is,
Yes.
it's beautiful, but it's just not the whole month. It's just not like that. So just have that awareness.
And I think having compassion for yourself as well, because we
Mm,
can, they're going all the way back, tying up that loop all the way from the beginning of the pressure to work in within a man's hormonal cycle, right?
yeah.
Within a day, there's this expectation that we put up on ourselves,
Mm, mm,
especially if we're saying yes while we're ovulating and while we're like energized and
mm,
our whole body is like sustained with this amazing energy.
mm,
When if we say yes to a project, for example, that is going to span much longer than your
mm,
ovulation phase, having grace with yourself that you're not going to necessarily have that same energy and drive. So if you have any kind of control around the project, can you cater or your work schedule, for
mm,
example,
mm,
to your cycle, and can you actually spread that out and know that maybe you're going to feel less productive while you're bleeding, or especially
mm,
when you are in your inner autumn, maybe you're going to feel more stressed and more erratic with your emotions, and so it doesn't really serve you to be doing all of these things. So can you bring this wisdom into
yeah.
everything that you do, quite
Mm,
frankly, but
mm,
can you have grace with yourself and
mm,
not put yourself into so much pressure because you said yes to these things?
yeah.
Can you, yeah, just be kind to yourself to with what you do say yes to, and know that your energy is not always going to sustain in that
Yeah.
same way. And if you know that, you can kind of forward plan that, then you get to complete it, and then you're not pushing for a deadline while you're on day one of your bleed, when all you want to
Mm,
do is curl up in a ball of blankets and like shut the
mm,
world out. You're not then
yeah.
putting yourself under that pressure to deliver
Hmm.
and then punishing yourself because you said yes to it.
Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. A lot of, yeah, just medicine and what you just said, it's like, can you have grace? Can you befriend your cyclical nature? Can you really surrender to the ebbs and flows? Can you build it into work, relationships, friendships, everything, nutrition, just, and play with it, right? Like play is such an important part of the cycle, because I also feel that one of the big teachings of the menstrual cycle and menstruality like work is releasing perfectionism,
Mm.
having, just also having a sense of humor, and just being okay with it not being perfect, because cycles are not perfect. They're not
Mm.
always the same length. They don't always feel the same. One cycle can feel very different to the next. Your bleed can come, for me, it came 3 days early this month. But I've been here so many times before that at least now my initial reaction isn't like shit. You know what I mean? It's like all
Yeah.
my plans have gone out the window. I'm a bit more like, okay, cool. What can I do to just like navigate this with grace and compassion, and how can I just laugh at this a little bit, you know what I mean, or just like to have a bit of humor with it, and release that all perfectionist tendency to control every day of my life, because it can sometimes swing that way when you first start this work. You're really drawn to it, right? And you're like, I'm going to micromanage my life with my menstrual cycle, yes.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I feel like that's it's another podcast, not one of mine, but someone else's.
Yeah, and then sometimes there's like disappointment because you're like, I'm not doing it right, or I didn't quite feel like this. So the whole process is much more fluid, and it's
Mm.
much more imperfect, and it's messy. It really is quite messy, and it's like, just, yeah, it's a massive initiation into surrender and fun and play, messiness, imperfection, yeah, all of the things.
I feel like it's the embracing of being the essence of being a woman. And
Mm,
it's something that has been, again, we're looping all the way back to the beginning. It's been so controlled and so constrained, actually, this is part of the essence of the feminine and the feminine energy, right? So as physical females, we're essentially that embodiment of the chaos and the mess and the imperfection and the beauty that lies within that and the gifts that lie within that. And I really feel like this work, everything that we've discussed today and really tracking with your menstrual cycle, it's that permission slip to be a woman in all of your flavors, in all of your expression. And just by every single woman who ever listens to this podcast to embrace this cyclical nature, that is so healing ancestrally. It's healing for your daughters, it's healing for future generations, because it's the embrace of the true essence of what it is to have a womb, essentially.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, yes to everything that you just said.
Yes. So I know that we'd just gone on a small tangent, but salads and like lighter things that you'd spoken about earlier, but what other things can support us with this high estrogen, Beyonce, come at me boys energy?
So nutritionally, this is like eating light time. You know, I said estrogen suppresses appetite. This might be a day when you're not feeling particularly hungry. Really going for those fresh foods, loads of antioxidants. Like, we really need that antioxidant support, because actually ovulation is, without getting too technical, quite oxidizing. So we need the antioxidants to keep us protected from everything that's going on with ovulation. So like loads of beautiful salads, loads of different colored fruit, veg, etc. Also keep that estrogen detox flowing. So carry on with those foods, those fermented foods, carry on with the things like the broccoli sprouts, the cruciferous veg, but also support your ovulation with foods like, if you're not vegan, eggs are literally the symbol of ovulation. You know what I mean? Like,
eggs for eggs.
Eggs for eggs. Well, exactly. You know, like they have B12, which is a massive nutrient needed in ovulation. They contain amazing amounts of omega fats, which we need for healthy ovulation, the signaling between the brain and the ovaries. They contain protein. You know, protein is almost like that building block for all our hormones. So, you know, if you are vegan, just making sure that B12 is coming in all month. Maybe you have a load of recipes with nutritional yeast on them at this time. That could be a nice little B12 boost. But just embracing that freshness and lightness, but don't then think, oh, I wish I could eat like this all month long. No, you just careful with that thought, because that's one that so many of us have. It's like, why can't I eat like this every day? Why can't I always just want a green smoothie and a salad? You know, like, this is not biologically what you're primed to be doing. This is the time to eat like this, and let's embrace it, let's enjoy it, but let's also enjoy all the other phases. And that's one of the little shadow thoughts that hangs around, I think, the kind of, why can't I always eat a lettuce leaf and feel satisfied?
Courtesy of diet culture again, but essentially, when you're eating cyclically, you're essentially feeding yourself for your future self. You're feeding yourself, but when we're going into that fall phase or that winter phase, that inner fall and inner winter, you're essentially stockpiling calories and energy and for when you're not desiring to eat so much. So it's less about, I think, planning to eat a certain way, to your point, throughout the entire month, and realize that you're not operating on a 24-hour cycle. You're operating on a 28-ish day cycle. And so what you put in your body now becomes support for your future self, or
absolutely. Because I think when you're trying to live in that 24-hour cycle, you're very much, what I put in my body now supports me right now. That's the mentality, right? So I must restrict now, kind of thing, because all of the stories we've got in our heads. But when you've got the cyclical thing, you're so right, you are stockpiling. You're
Yeah.
like, I'm getting ready because there's like, I'm going to need a lot of energy in a week's time. This is a time to really feed myself because I won't be very hungry in a week's time. And that completely shifts everything, like
Yeah.
absolutely everything. You're nourishing your future self. Yeah.
Oh, and that feels so like that for me. I just got like a really warm
Mm,
re-parenting ourselves as well. It's
yeah.
mothering ourselves and knowing that what by listening to your body in the now, you're actually supporting your future self. I think that that's really
Mm-hmm.
beautiful
Mm.
and to really anchor in. And that for me feels really caring. Like I'll always thank my past self when she did something really caring to preempt
Mm.
how my future self was going to feel. And then I'm really, really appreciative of like, I don't know, putting the heated blanket on
Yeah.
when I went down to make a cup of tea. So I come back to a warm bed. I'm like, thanks past self for making that decision. Because I'm really grateful right now.
I love that. I love it.
Oh, okay. So thank you for all of
Mm.
these incredible wisdom drops. I feel like there's so much in this that can support so many people
Mm.
in just getting that awareness and reconnecting to their body. So I just really want to thank you for that. Where can people find you if they want more of this, when they if
Mm.
more of you and all the magic?
Absolutely. So I am active, very active on Instagram. That's kind of my little place. It's at hormones underscore in underscore harmony. Come and find me. DM me if you've got like questions or anything that's come up for you, and I will always, like direct you to other resources that may help you even more. I'm always like about just spreading the hormonal love, and just like empowering you in whatever way possible. That's probably the best way to come and find me. You can always email me or go to my website hormonesinharmony.co.uk. But yeah, you could just Google me and just contact me like that. But yeah, I think Instagram is really, I stopped trying to be active everywhere. Hormonally, that wasn't working for me. Nervous system wise, that wasn't working for me, right? That's other conversations to be had. So I just focus on being present in one place and connecting with people there. And that is very much where I am. So come and say hello, please. And if you're listening to this and you have questions about what we've talked about, yeah, or comments or whatever, please, please, please reach out. It's just always a pleasure to connect and just, yeah, just have just like that, like I said, spreading the hormonal love.
Spreading the hormonal love. I love that. I'm going to put all of the ways that people can find you in the show notes, your website, everything like that. So be sure to check them out. Do you have any final parting words of wisdom for everyone listening?
I feel it's just the message of you are not meant to feel the same every day, and there is nothing wrong with you. And go back to that again and again and again. Really reconnect with that. Like on my Instagram, you'll find the chart of women's cycles, all of that. Message me if you want a reminder. But it's this: I'm not meant to feel the same every day.
Mm-hmm.
When you
Yeah.
wake up thinking, why do I feel like this or the other? Just come back to that. I'm not meant to feel the same every day. It shifts everything, everything, everything. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Ah, it's been a pleasure.
Same here. Absolutely loved. I feel we could talk for hours, but I
I
think it's time
know.
to.
It's time for us to go.
Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you. This has been Wild and Untamed. I am your host, Lara Raybone. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you had so many aha moments and received everything that you were meant to receive from this episode. Don't forget to check out the show notes to connect with myself or Giulietta. If anything resonated, please, please, please drop us a message and ask the questions. Ask the questions that are on your heart. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to like, to leave us a little review, to rate the podcast. It's really supportive and really helpful in making sure that these conversations get out there into the world for those whose ears are meant to hear them. I love you and enjoy the rest of your day.